In today's lesson, we're going to look at one of my favorite blues subgenres, the jump blues. Now, this was a style that was played a lot by guys like T-Bone Walker and B.B. King. But for today's lesson, we're going to look at a few of the lesser known players. I've got 3 solo segments that I've transcribed that I'll play down and then we'll discuss. My name's Jack Roosh. Welcome to my channel. Let's get into it. Solo is from the great Hollywood Fats from the tune Rock This House. Now, Hollywood Fats was a great West Coast blues player, and as far as I know, he only ever did one album, the Hollywood Fats Band album. But it's a fantastic record worth checking out if you're into this style of blues playing. Now, this is only one 12-bar segment from this solo. There's a lot of great stuff on this tune. But I chose this one passage because it has this great little chromatic lick that I use all the time. And basically starts on the root and then goes from the flat 3 up to the 5, all chromatic. This is a great line you can use all over the place. Tons of players play this kind of thing. Piano players use this kind of stuff all the time. So this is a great phrase. You can get a lot of mileage out of it. So he plays this phrase, he repeats it a couple times. And he kind of does this little variation on it. And then coming out of the 1 chord going to the 4 chord, he hits this big flat 7, the G note, over the A7 chord. And that really voice leads you to the 3rd of the 4 chord, the D chord. So that movement right there really pulls you to the 4 chord. And then over the 4 chord, he kind of plays this just sort of bluesy pentatonic stuff with a little bit of the flat 5th in there. But his phrasing is really fantastic. His right hand articulation, his rhythmic feel, that's a huge part of this style. Just really having a good swing feel and good articulation with the pick. Then moving to basically the 5 chord, he kind of does this kind of like a 2 minor chord. It's almost like a 2-5 instead of a 5-4 in the turnaround section. You could also look at it as going down to a 5 chord, the 9 chord. But he kind of does this little chord jab, and then he goes just kind of ends it with this really great bluesy phrase, hitting this double stop up here, which is right out of the A major triad, and just kind of blending this flat 7 with some major pentatonic stuff, minor 3rd and major 3rd, combining all those things together to make just a really great bluesy solo with some really fantastic phrasing. Next solo is from Ronnie Earl, another unsung hero of the blues. This is from a live recording of the tune T-Bone Boogie, and he plays tons of great stuff on this tune. But this little solo opens with a really great lick that is a common theme a lot of people use in this style of music, where he's actually alternating between the same note on 2 different strings. So he's playing the 5th E, but he's sliding into it up here on the G string and then hitting the same note down here on the B string. So and then kind of getting out of it with this little bluesy phrase. Again, combining some notes from the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic, really leaning on the sixth scale degree from the major pentatonic scale, which gives you this really bright kind of 13 sound. But he bends that up to the flat 7. And then over the 4 chord, he's playing these double stops that are really just taken right out of the chord shape, right out of this, you know, this D chord shape. And he's doing. And again, hitting that 6th, which in this case over the 4 chord is actually the 3rd of the chord. But it gives this really bright sound, which is a real staple of this kind of upbeat, up-tempo, swing, jump blues. So. And then over the 5 chord, he does this little, which is just a great little phrase. Again, I use this all the time. Just alternating between the 4 and the 3 and then going up to the 5. And again, coming down to that 6. So this is something that you can start incorporating in your playing if you are used to using kind of the minor pentatonic scale. Adding that 6th in there is really great when you're playing over these up-tempo shuffles to give it a little bit more, you know, a little bit brighter sound and something that's a little stylistically more appropriate. And then also, obviously, adding the major 3rd and the minor 3rd in there together. So, you know, this kind of thing. This last solo is taken from the great Junior Watson, one of the true unsung heroes of the blues and one of my personal favorite guitar players of all time. I feel like Junior Watson doesn't get quite enough recognition. But this is a great solo taken from the tune Buttertop, a live version of the tune Buttertop, which is one of his instrumentals. And this solo starts out with this big bending lick and then kind of comes down and hits a lot of the same ideas we've been talking about. So it starts out like this. Right, so he hits that big bend and then he comes down and hits the minor 3rd to the major 3rd and then the root down to the major 6th, right? So a lot of these same notes that give it a really bright sound that's sort of signature to this style. And then he walks down chromatically from the root to the flat 7, right? Which this is a classic use of voice leading. Walking down from the root, then to the flat 7, which naturally wants to resolve to the 3rd of this D chord. Right? Then over the 4 chord, he's playing kind of out of this position right here, out of this shape for a D chord, which is just like if you took an open C, like an open C cowboy chord, and moved it up a whole step. Right? And he plays this. Right, great line. So here he's hammering on to the 3rd of the chord and then just kind of playing right out of the major scale. And then this little chromatic move where he goes from the 3rd up to the flat 5th and then this little hammer on. Right? And then coming down to the flat 7 again. So really cool, really hip little line. And then continuing on, he does this right, just such a killer little phrase there, tying those chords together. So this is another chromatic move from the 3rd to the flat 5th, very similar to what we did down here. And then this hammer on, right, and then going to the 5 chord, he's kind of, you know, playing out of this position right here of like a E13 or, you know, E9 with a 13 on top. You know, you hear guys do like things like that. This is kind of a variation. So he's doing this chromatic and then kind of laying this finger down on the 7th fret, and then chromatic again, and then hitting these double stops, right, which that again is right out of this chord shape, right out of this E shape, and sliding it down a whole step, right? Such a great phrase. And then just kind of wraps it up with some blues stuff. Again, I'm hitting that major 6. Right, so all those classic kind of phrases and ideas using the minor 3rd, major 3rd, and the raised 6th. All right, so this was just a brief look into this style of playing. There's obviously tons more you can get into with this. It's a pretty deep rabbit hole you can go down. But hopefully with this lesson, you got turned on to some new players that maybe you weren't familiar with before, and some new sounds you can start adding to your blues playing to make it a little exciting. So if you like this lesson, please give it a like, leave a comment. You know, if you dig this sort of thing, I can do some more lessons like this in the future. As always, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.